I never imagined that my quest for a little extra college money would lead me down a path so dark, it would forever eclipse any sense of normalcy I once clung to. My name is Samantha, and if you're reading this, you're about to walk with me through a night that has haunted my dreams ever since. It was supposed to be simple: watch over a house, keep things tidy, and make sure nothing went amiss while the owners were away. At least, that's what the ad promised. An easy gig for a college student like me, desperately combing through classifieds for a job that could fit into my chaotic schedule. I stumbled upon the ad by sheer accident, or perhaps it was fate's cruel sense of humor. A babysitting job, it said, in a remote house, perfectly timed with the night of a lunar eclipse. The pay was generous, enough to make me overlook the odd specificity of the date and the isolation. An adventure, I thought to myself, a break from the monotony of lectures, essays, and relentless deadlines. Little did I know, I was about to become a key player in a nightmare that was meticulously orchestrated under the shadow of the moon. So, with a mix of naivety and excitement, I packed a bag with essentials and set out, completely unaware of the horror that awaited me. As I drove down the winding roads leading to the house, the reality of my decision began to dawn on me. The further I traveled, the more the comforting lights of the city faded into the distance, replaced by an unnerving darkness that seemed to consume everything in its path. It was the beginning of a journey that would test the very limits of my sanity. A journey that, looking back, I wish I had the foresight to avoid. But there's no turning back time, only moving forward and confronting the demons that lurk in the shadows. Welcome to my story, a tale of survival, fear, and the realization that some jobs are just not worth taking. Welcome to the Eclipse of the Damned. As I left the city's comforting glow behind, my car's headlights cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow, winding road that snaked through an increasingly dense forest. The further I drove, the more I felt the isolation of my destination. There was something unsettling about the way the trees seemed to close in around me, their branches stretching out like fingers trying to grasp at something just out of reach. The occasional rustle of leaves or a distant animal cry only added to the growing unease settling in my stomach. I told myself it was just the unfamiliarity of the setting, a stark contrast to the urban environment I was used to. The GPS announced my impending arrival with a mechanical coldness that did nothing to alleviate the tension. As the house came into view, my initial unease gave way to a momentary sense of awe. It was more of a mansion than a house, an imposing structure that stood as a testament to isolation. Surrounded by nothing but the untamed wilderness, it felt like a world entirely removed from my own. Pulling into the driveway, the house's exterior bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight, it struck me just how alone I was out here. The nearest neighbor was miles away, a fact that the couple had mentioned in passing, but now felt ominously relevant. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of my engine cooling and the occasional whisper of the wind through the trees. As I stepped out of my car, a chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from the realization that I was about to spend the night in this secluded mansion. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, though a quick scan of the surrounding darkness revealed nothing but the night. The house, with its dark windows and towering presence, seemed to loom over me, a silent guardian to secrets I could only begin to imagine. With each step towards the front door, my heart pounded louder in my chest. It wasn't fear, I told myself, but the adrenaline of stepping into the unknown. The job had seemed like such a straightforward task on paper, but standing here, on the threshold of this mysterious mansion, I couldn't help but feel like I had signed up for something far beyond a simple babysitting gig. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my courage and rang the doorbell, the sound echoing eerily in the quiet of the night. The door swung open, and I was greeted with smiles that were meant to be reassuring, but did little to dispel the growing sense of dread that had taken root in my mind. Little did I know, my journey into the heart of darkness had only just begun. The door opened to reveal a couple who seemed almost too eager to greet me, their smiles wide, but not quite reaching their eyes. "Samantha, we're so glad you could make it," the woman said, her voice laced with a warmth that seemed rehearsed. She was dressed in a way that was oddly formal for the setting, her attire more suited for a dinner party than an evening at home. The man beside her extended his hand, his grip firm, his smile just as practiced. "Welcome to our home," he added, his tone polite, but carrying an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. As I stepped inside, the interior of the house struck me with its stark contrast to the wild, untamed nature outside. The foyer was grand, adorned with expensive-looking art and furniture that looked more like museum pieces than items meant for daily use. The house was immaculate, almost too perfect, as if every item had been carefully placed to create a specific impression. The couple led me into the living room, continuing to make polite conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about them. They were friendly, yes, but in a way that felt overly calculated. Their questions about my drive over and how I found the ad for the babysitting job seemed tinged with an unspoken scrutiny, as if they were measuring my responses for something more than just casual interest. I tried to put my unease aside, attributing it to the newness of the situation and the natural nerves that come with meeting strangers. Yet, as they showed me around the house, that initial gut feeling of unease didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. The house itself, with its long, shadowy hallways and rooms that seemed too quiet, felt like a character in its own right, hiding secrets behind its luxurious facade. Their behavior, too, added layers to my discomfort. There were moments when their conversation would abruptly stop, their eyes meeting in a way that suggested a private communication I wasn't privy to. And then there were the small, almost imperceptible glances they shot me when they thought I wasn't looking, evaluating, always evaluating. Despite the oddness of the situation, I reminded myself that I was here for a job, and perhaps it was just the isolation and the grandeur of the house playing tricks on my mind. After all, they were just a couple in need of a babysitter, and I was just a college student looking to earn some extra cash. But as the night began to settle in, and the shadows within the house grew longer, so too did the shadows of doubt within my mind. What had I walked into? And more importantly, would I be able to walk back out? After the initial introductions and a brief tour, the couple excused themselves, leaving me to familiarize myself further with the vastness of their home. They mentioned something about preparing for the evening, their words laced with an undertone of anticipation I couldn't quite understand. Alone, I began to wander, my steps echoing softly on the polished floors. The house was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each turn revealing more of its opulent and yet somehow oppressive beauty. It was during this exploration that I stumbled upon the first of many oddities that would come to define my night, a small study, filled with an eclectic collection of artifacts that seemed wildly out of place. There were ancient-looking texts in languages I couldn't identify, statues that depicted unsettling figures, and paintings whose eyes seemed to follow me as I moved around the room. Curiosity piqued, I continued my exploration, finding more rooms that were kept under lock and key. The couple had given me a keyring for the house, but several doors resisted my attempts to open them, their locks unyielding. The mystery of what lay behind these doors only added to the growing unease that had taken root in my stomach. Why would a seemingly normal couple have rooms in their house that were kept so securely locked away? As I moved deeper into the house, I found a room that took my breath away, not for its beauty, but for the chilling collection it housed. Shelves lined with jars, each containing items that defied rational explanation. Some jars held what appeared to be relics of a bygone era, while others contained things far more macabre. It was a private museum dedicated to the arcane and the unsettling, a tangible manifestation of the unease that had been growing within me since my arrival. Despite the alarm bells ringing in my head, my feet carried me further, drawn by a mix of fear and fascination. It was then I discovered a locked door that seemed different from the others. It was heavier, sturdier, and the air around it felt charged, as if hiding something far more significant than the rest. No key from the ring fit its lock, and no amount of curiosity could compel me to force it open, the sense of dread it inspired too overwhelming. I retreated back to the more familiar parts of the house, my mind racing with questions. What were the couple involved in? What was the purpose of these artifacts, these locked rooms? And most importantly, what had I gotten myself into? As the sky outside darkened towards night and the time for the lunar eclipse drew nearer, my unease transformed into a tangible fear. The house, with its secrets and shadows, felt less like a place of employment and more like a trap from which I might not escape. Their interactions with me became increasingly strange as well. The woman, who had been almost overly friendly upon my arrival, now treated me with a scrutinizing coldness. She asked me odd, probing questions about my beliefs, my family background, and if I had ever experienced anything out of the ordinary. Her eyes searched mine for answers, for what, I couldn't be sure. The man, on the other hand, became more withdrawn, his previous warmth replaced by a distracted, almost nervous energy. He paced the length of the house, muttering to himself and occasionally stopping to examine the strange artifacts with a critical eye. Several times, I caught him watching me, his gaze intense and calculating, as if trying to decipher my thoughts. As dinner approached, they insisted I join them, a request that felt more like a summons. The meal was an elaborate affair, far more extravagant than what I would have expected for a simple evening at home. Yet, the food might as well have been ash in my mouth for all I could taste, my attention consumed by the couple's behavior. Throughout the meal, they exchanged knowing looks and cryptic comments about the alignment and preparations that needed to be completed before the eclipse reached its zenith. They spoke of the event with a reverence that bordered on fanaticism, hinting at its significance in a way that made my blood run cold. The conversation danced around the edges of something dark and unfathomable, a plan in which I was unwittingly a part. The atmosphere grew heavier as the night wore on, the air charged with an expectancy that was almost suffocating. The house, with its myriad secrets, felt more oppressive by the minute, a cage from which I was increasingly desperate to escape. But with each passing moment, the couple's behavior suggested that leaving was not an option, that I was here for a purpose far beyond what I had been led to believe. My initial unease had blossomed into a full-blown fear, a realization that I was caught in a web far more complex and dangerous than any babysitting job. The true intentions of the house's occupants were becoming alarmingly clear, tied to the eclipse and rituals of a nature I dared not fully comprehend. As the night closed in around us, the question of what role I was meant to play in their plans loomed large, a shadow I could not escape. As the evening wore on, the air within the house grew thick with anticipation. The approaching lunar eclipse seemed to cast an invisible pressure that weighed heavily on my shoulders, a tangible representation of my growing dread. Outside, the natural world seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of nocturnal life silenced as if in reverence of the celestial event. Inside, the couple moved with a purposeful urgency, their preparations becoming more frenetic as the moon began its journey across the sky. The atmosphere was electric, charged with an energy that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The house, with its long shadows and hidden secrets, felt more like a prison than ever, its walls closing in on me with each passing moment. I found myself moving from room to room, restless and unable to settle, my every instinct screaming that something was very wrong. As the eclipse drew nearer, the couple's behavior intensified. They no longer attempted to mask their strange rituals, openly discussing arrangements and final touches in my presence. Their earlier attempts at normalcy were abandoned, replaced by a fervor that was almost palpable. It was clear that this event was the culmination of something long planned, and I was an unwitting participant in their dark celebration. The isolation of the house now felt more pronounced, a deliberate choice to keep prying eyes away. I realized with a sinking heart that any cries for help would go unheard, swallowed by the vast wilderness that surrounded us. The couple had chosen this location for its seclusion, and I was trapped within it, as much a part of their plans as the eclipse itself. My attempts at conversation were met with vague responses or ignored altogether, their focus solely on the night's event. The few times I hinted at leaving, my suggestions were skillfully deflected, their assurances that everything would be over soon doing little to ease my mind. It was clear that I was not meant to leave, at least not until whatever they had planned had come to pass. As the moon began to cover the sun, casting an eerie twilight over the land, the tension reached its peak. The couple donned robes that seemed as out of place as the artifacts in their home, their faces set in expressions of solemn anticipation. They invited me to join them outside, to witness the moment, their voices leaving no room for refusal. Standing there, under the darkening sky, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The eclipse, a beautiful natural phenomenon, now seemed ominous, a backdrop to something unspeakable. I was far from home, far from anyone who could help me, caught in the web of two people whose intentions were as dark as the shadow that crept across the moon. In that moment, under the watchful eye of the eclipse, I realized the true extent of my isolation. I was not just physically trapped by the walls of the house and the vast wilderness, I was ensnared in the psychological grip of fear and uncertainty. The anticipation of what was to come, the realization of my helplessness, was a prison of its own making, one from which escape seemed increasingly impossible. As the eclipse's shadow deepened, the house itself seemed to awaken, its atmosphere charged with an energy that defied explanation. Strange occurrences, once mere trickles of unease in the fabric of the night, now surged into waves of outright terror, blurring the lines between reality and something far more sinister. It began with whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, soft and insidious, as if the house were speaking in a tongue meant only for the initiated. I would turn, expecting to confront the source, only to find the room empty, the silence mocking my confusion. These were not the benign creaks and groans of an old house settling, they were deliberate, a communication I could feel but not understand. Then came the shadows, shifting in ways that defied the natural play of light and dark. Corners that should have been illuminated by the dim light of the house's interior were instead pools of impenetrable darkness, as if swallowing the light whole. Figures seemed to flit just beyond the edge of my vision there one moment, gone the next, leaving me to question whether they had been there at all. The air itself felt different, thicker, as if charged with static. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched, and several times I spun around quickly, half expecting to catch a glimpse of whatever unseen observer had fixed its gaze upon me. But there was nothing, only the lingering feeling of a presence I could not see, but felt unmistakably. Perhaps the most unsettling occurrence was the mirror in the hallway, which I passed by countless times without incident. But as the night drew on, I caught a glimpse of movement within its reflection that was not my own. I stopped, heart racing, and stared into the glass, but the image was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me to wonder if my mind was playing tricks on me. These events accumulated, layer upon layer, until I was wrapped in a shroud of dread. The rational part of my mind struggled to maintain a grip on reality, to dismiss these occurrences as the result of stress and imagination. But another part of me, a part that was becoming increasingly difficult to silence, whispered that something truly unnatural was at play. The culmination of these strange occurrences left me in a state of heightened alertness, every sense attuned to the slightest deviation from the norm. The house, with its shifting shadows and whispered secrets, had become a character in its own right, a sentient being with intentions and desires as opaque as the darkness that now enveloped us both. As the eclipse reached its zenith and the couple's preparations neared completion, I was left to wonder what role I was to play in this unfolding drama. The boundary between the real and the unreal had not just been blurred, it had been obliterated, leaving me adrift in a sea of doubt and fear, uncertain of what would come next, but painfully aware that the veil between worlds was at its thinnest, and something was eagerly waiting on the other side. As the eclipse carved its path across the sky, the couple's demeanor shifted in a way that sent chills down my spine. Their once veiled references to the night's significance became more direct, their cryptic hints evolving into unsettling revelations. The air between us grew heavy with foreboding, as if each word they spoke was a piece of a sinister puzzle I was only beginning to comprehend. The woman, her eyes alight with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism, spoke of the eclipse not just as a celestial event, but as a gateway, an opportunity for power and transformation. There are moments, she said, her voice low and steady, when the barriers between worlds thin, when sacrifices are made, and rewards are reaped. Her choice of words, especially sacrifices, echoed ominously in the growing darkness, implying a cost I had yet to fully understand. Their conversations, once cryptic, now took on a chilling clarity. They spoke of the house as a chosen place, selected for its isolation and for the energy it contained, an energy they intended to harness. The artifacts I had stumbled upon, the locked rooms, the strange symbols etched into the floors and walls all, were pieces of a ritual that had been centuries in the making, a ritual in which I was inexplicably and unwillingly a part. I began to piece together the horrifying truth of their plans. The job, the invitation to their home, had been no coincidence. I had been selected, lured here under the guise of a simple babysitting gig for a purpose far more sinister. The couple's need for secrecy, their bizarre behavior, and the house's unsettling atmosphere were all part of a larger design, one that required my presence as a final crucial element. Their hints grew more ominous as the night progressed, their excitement barely contained as they prepared for whatever was to come. The rituals they described, steeped in darkness and spoken of with reverence, were not mere superstitions, but practices they believed would grant them power, at a cost they were all too willing to pay. As the realization of my situation settled in, a cold dread took hold of me. I was trapped, not just within the walls of this house, but within the web of their plans. The couple, their smiles now twisted into something grotesque, seemed not just unsettling but monstrous, practitioners of an ancient and dark craft that I could not begin to understand. Their veiled hints had become clear, their sinister plans laid bare. I was to be a part of their ritual, a key component in a ceremony that was as old as it was dark. The night, once an opportunity for adventure, had become a nightmare, and I was at its center, caught in the grip of a revelation that threatened to consume me as completely as the shadow that now covered the moon. As the moon's shadow began to swallow the last sliver of light, the true nature of the night's events was laid bare before me. The couple, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of candlelight, turned their attention towards me with an intensity that froze my blood. It was in this moment, under the cloak of the lunar eclipse, that they revealed their true intentions, their words a chilling affirmation of the fears that had been gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. "The time has come," the woman said, her voice a mesmerizing blend of excitement and solemnity. "You are the key to the culmination of years of preparation. Tonight, under the shadow of the eclipse, we will complete a ritual that has been handed down through generations, a ritual that requires a pure and unknowing soul." A revelation struck me like a physical blow, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with a clarity that I wished I could deny. The odd job posting, the isolation of the house, their peculiar behavior, it had all been a meticulous setup for this moment. I was not here to babysit, I was here to be used as a pawn in their dark ceremony. The man stepped forward, his eyes alight with a fervor that bordered on madness. You see, the eclipse is not just a celestial event, it's a doorway, an opening in the fabric of reality that allows us to tap into ancient powers. Your presence, your essence, is the final ingredient needed to bridge the worlds, he explained, his voice steady and convinced of his own delusions. Panic surged within me, a desperate need to flee, to escape this nightmare. But I was paralyzed, trapped not just by the physical confines of the house, but by the realization of how deeply I had been ensnared in their web of madness. As they began to chant in a language I couldn't understand, the candles flickered as if in response, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. The couple moved with a purpose, arranging symbols and artifacts around me, their movements precise and practiced. It was a dance of darkness, a preparation for a sacrifice I had no intention of being a part of. I looked around, desperate for a way out, but the doors were locked, the windows barred. I was a lamb led to slaughter, caught in the midst of a ritual that was as ancient as it was evil. The couple's voices grew louder, the air around us charged with an energy that felt both terrifying and alive. In that moment, under the darkened sky and the watchful eye of the eclipse, I realized the full extent of the horror I had walked into. This was no mere gathering, it was a satanic ritual, and I was to be the centerpiece, a living sacrifice to their twisted desires. The darkness of the night mirrored the darkness of their intentions, a realization that filled me with a dread so profound it threatened to engulf me whole. The ritual unfolded around me, a maelstrom of chants and symbols that pulled at the very fabric of my being. I was caught in the eye of a storm, a vortex of ancient evil that sought to use me as a conduit for its return. The couple's faces, once merely unsettling, were now monstrous in their ecstasy, transformed by the ritual into avatars of a darkness that had no place in the light of day. As the eclipse reached its peak, the world held its breath, and I stood at the precipice, staring into the abyss that had been opened in the heart of this cursed house. The ritual, the couple, the eclipse all converged into a single moment of terrifying clarity. I was in the grip of something far beyond my understanding, a pawn in a game that played with the very essence of darkness itself. As the ritual reached its fever pitch, a surge of primal fear ignited within me, fueling a desperate urge to escape the nightmare I had been ensnared in. The realization of my perilous situation, of the horrifying extent of the trap I had walked into, lent me a burst of adrenaline unlike anything I had ever experienced. My mind raced, searching for any possible way out of the ritual that was unfolding around me. In a moment of sheer panic and determination, I pushed against the nearest figure, the woman, using the element of surprise to my advantage. She stumbled, her concentration broken, and the intensity of the momentary chaos disrupted the ritual's rhythm. Seizing the opportunity, I darted away, my only thought to put as much distance between myself and the couple as possible. The house, once a labyrinth of mystery and shadow, became my prison, its corridors and locked doors a maze designed to keep me trapped. Every turn seemed to lead me deeper into its heart, away from the possibility of escape. The artifacts and symbols that had once intrigued me now mocked my plight, their true purpose, a testament to the couple's malevolence. In my frantic search for an exit, I stumbled upon a window, a narrow glimmer of hope. It was barred, but in my desperation, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a heavy candlestick, the weight of it grounding me in the moment, and swung with all my might. The sound of shattering glass was the most beautiful chaos, a symphony to my ears, promising a chance at freedom. Climbing through the window was a struggle, the broken glass and metal bars inflicting cuts and bruises, but pain was a small price to pay for escape. I emerged into the night, the cool air on my skin, a sharp contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the house. The ground was unforgiving as I landed, but I was propelled forward by a singular instinct: survival. The estate was vast, the wilderness around it a dark expanse of unknowns, but fear of the unknown was preferable to the horrors behind me. My legs carried me across the uneven terrain, driven by the terror of what would happen if I were caught. The sounds of the night were now my allies, covering the noise of my escape and offering a semblance of companionship in my solitary flight. Behind me, the house stood silent, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the eclipse, a monument to the nightmare I had barely escaped. The realization of how close I had come to being a victim of their dark ritual was overwhelming, each breath a reminder of the thin line between life and death I had walked. In the distance, the lights of civilization, dim and far-reaching, promised sanctuary. My mind reeled with the events I had endured, the knowledge of the couple's intentions a heavy burden. The ritual, the eclipse, the couple's twisted desires all had converged to create a nightmarish reality that I had narrowly escaped. My escape was not just a physical journey, but a mental and emotional ordeal, a test of my will to survive against forces that sought to use me for their unfathomable aims. As I ran, the house and its occupants receded into the darkness, but the scars of the experience were indelibly etched into my psyche, a constant reminder of the horror I had faced and the terrifying extent of the situation I had been lured into. In the frenzied moments following my escape through the shattered window, the instinct to survive overrode every other thought and emotion. The night was dark, the landscape unfamiliar, but I was driven by an unyielding determination to evade capture and make it out alive. My surroundings, once an imposing barrier, became my advantage as I navigated the treacherous terrain with a single-minded focus on freedom. The estate was surrounded by dense woods, and I plunged into the underbrush without hesitation. Branches clawed at my skin and roots threatened to trip me at every step, but each obstacle only fueled my resolve. I knew that the couple would soon realize my escape and that the wilderness around me would become a hunting ground. My breath came in ragged gasps, the cold air stinging my lungs, but I dared not slow down. The sounds of the forest were both a comfort and a curse, masking my movements, but also reminding me of how alone I was. Every snap twig or rustle of leaves sent a jolt of fear through me, but I pressed on, relying on my intuition and the moon's faint light to guide me. At one point, I stumbled upon a shallow creek, its waters icy and swift. Without a second thought, I waded through it, hoping the water would help mask my scent from any would-be pursuers. The cold was a shock to my system, but it also served as a stark reminder of the stakes of my flight. Emerging from the creek, I found myself on the edge of what appeared to be an old orchard, the gnarled trees offering scant cover, but a clear direction away from the house. My mind raced, trying to remember any details of the estate's layout that could aid in my escape. I recalled the mention of a service road used for deliveries, a potential path to safety if I could find it. The challenge was not just physical but mental. Fear and doubt crept in with every step, whispering that escape was impossible, that the couple's reach would extend beyond the woods. I battled these thoughts with every fiber of my being, reminding myself that surrender was not an option. My resolve was tested with each obstacle, but it was also strengthened, a testament to the human will to survive against all odds. As I navigated the orchard, the realization that I had no idea where I was going weighed heavily on me. The risk of running in circles or, worse, back towards the house, was real. But then, through the trees, I glimpsed a faint light, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Focusing on that light, I pushed my exhausted body to move faster, the possibility of reaching safety, lending me a new surge of energy. The challenges I faced in those woods were daunting, a brutal reminder of my vulnerability. Yet, with each step, I proved to myself that I was not as helpless as I had feared. My surroundings, once a prison, became the key to my salvation, offering me the means to evade capture and fight for my freedom. The journey through the night was a testament to the strength I didn't know I possessed, forged in the crucible of fear and desperation. It was a battle not just for survival, but for my very soul, against forces that sought to bind it to their will. In the end, it was my quick thinking and determination that carried me through the darkness, a beacon of hope in a night that seemed endless. My heart pounding in my chest, I emerged from the dense cover of the woods, guided by the faint light that promised safety. The service road was just ahead, its gravel surface a stark contrast to the natural terrain I had traversed. But it was there, on the edge of the woods, that the couple found me. They appeared suddenly, as if conjured by the darkness itself, blocking my path to freedom. The shock of seeing them, so far from the house and so close to my moment of escape, was like a physical blow. Fear surged within me, a primal, overwhelming tide that threatened to sweep away the fragile veneer of courage I had managed to muster. They stood side by side, their expressions a twisted mix of anger, determination, and a dark, triumphant glee. "You cannot escape," the woman said, her voice cold and sure. "This is your destiny. You were chosen." The man's silence was equally unnerving, his eyes locked on mine with an intensity that spoke volumes. In that moment, I understood the depth of their madness, the absolute conviction they held in their beliefs, and the lengths they were willing to go to fulfill their twisted ritual. But amidst the fear, a spark of defiance ignited within me. I had come too far, evaded their grasp for too long, to simply surrender at the final hurdle. My mind raced, searching for a way out, a strategy to turn the tables in my favor. "Destiny can be changed," I countered, my voice steadier than I felt. I needed to buy time, to think. The road behind them led to safety, but I knew I couldn't outrun them. Not here, not in the open. As they advanced, I glanced around, desperate for anything I could use to my advantage. My eyes caught on a loose piece of gravel by my feet, an insignificant detail that sparked an idea. I waited until they were just a few steps away before I made my move. With a sudden, swift motion, I kicked the gravel up towards the man's face, aiming for his eyes. It was a small gesture, but it caught him off guard, causing him to flinch and momentarily shield his face. It was the distraction I needed. I darted to the side, my movements fueled by adrenaline, and pushed past the woman with all the strength I could muster. They were quick to recover, but those precious seconds bought me the advantage I needed. I sprinted down the service road, the sound of their angry shouts fading behind me. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but the fear of capture propelled me forward, each step a defiance of the fate they had planned for me. The confrontation was brief but intense, a testament to the human will to survive, even in the face of overwhelming odds. My fear, while never fully abating, was matched by a burgeoning bravery, a refusal to be a victim of their designs. My quick thinking, the result of desperation as much as determination, had turned the tables, however briefly, giving me the chance to escape. The couple's presence, so far from the safety of their controlled environment, was a stark reminder of the lengths they were willing to go to fulfill their dark desires. But in that moment of confrontation, I proved to myself and to them that I was not as powerless as they believed. I had faced them, outwitted them, and now I was running towards the light and the hope of salvation that lay just beyond their reach. As I fled down the service road, the darkness of the night seemed to press in from all sides, a tangible reminder of the eclipse at its zenith. Behind me, the couple's shouts had faded into the distance, but the threat they posed loomed as large as ever. The eclipse, a celestial event that had promised so much darkness and terror, was now my ally, its shadow covering my escape. The climax of the ritual, intended to be a moment of dark triumph for the couple, instead became the backdrop for my desperate bid for freedom. The energy in the air was electric, charged with the power of untold forces summoned by the eclipse. I could feel it, a palpable tension that thrummed through the ground and the very air I breathed, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the outcome of this mortal struggle. The terrain became more familiar, the edges of the forest giving way to open fields, and the distant lights of civilization. The eclipse was waning, its grip on the night loosening, and with its retreat came a renewed sense of hope. I dared to believe that I might actually make it, that I might escape the nightmare that had ensnared me. But the night was not done with me yet. A final obstacle lay in my path, a steep ravine that had been hidden by the darkness. I stumbled, my foot catching on the edge, and for a moment, I teetered on the brink, the abyss below a dark maw ready to swallow me whole. It was a heart-stopping moment, a cruel reminder of how close I had come to losing everything. With a desperate effort, I pulled myself back, my hands clawing at the solid ground, and I scrambled away from the edge. Panting, heart pounding, I looked back towards the house, now nothing more than a silhouette against the fading eclipse. There was no sign of the couple, their fate as ambiguous as the shadows that retreated with the moon's passing. I didn't wait to ponder their fate. The end of the eclipse was my signal to move, to put as much distance between myself and that place of darkness as possible. I ran, the first light of dawn painting the sky with strokes of pink and gold, a promise of a new beginning, a life reclaimed from the brink of unspeakable horror. My escape, as narrow as it was miraculous, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a refusal to succumb to the darkness. As the eclipse ended and the sun began to rise, I knew that I had been changed forever by the events of that night. The terror, the struggle for survival, had left indelible marks on my soul, but so too had the triumph of my escape. The fate of the couple remained a mystery, their intentions thwarted by my escape, but their ultimate destiny unknown. Did they vanish into the night, their dark desires unfulfilled? Or did the forces they had sought to command turn against them in their moment of failure? These questions lingered, but I found that I no longer sought the answers. My focus was on the future, on healing and moving forward from the darkness into the light. As I emerged from the edge of the woods, the first rays of dawn warming my face, I knew that the nightmare was over. The eclipse, with all its terror and beauty, was behind me, a dark chapter in my life that I would close, but never forget. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, free from the shadows of the past. The scars left by that night were not just physical, though they healed in time. It was the psychological wounds that proved harder to mend. Sleep became elusive, a battleground where the horrors of the past played out in endless loops, a vivid reminder of the terror I had faced. Each creak of the house, each shadow cast by the moonlight, sent waves of panic coursing through me, a visceral response to reminders of a night when the veil between worlds had thinned, and I had come face to face with true evil. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there were lessons to be learned. The ordeal had stripped away the naivety with which I had viewed the world, revealing the darker undercurrents that flowed beneath the surface of everyday life. It taught me the value of trust, not just in others but in my own instincts, which had screamed warnings that I had initially ignored. I learned the importance of strength, not the physical kind, but the resilience of the spirit, the unyielding will to survive, even when faced with unimaginable horror. Perhaps the most profound lesson was the understanding of freedom, a concept I had never truly appreciated until it was almost taken from me. The fight to reclaim my autonomy, to escape the clutches of those who sought to use me for their dark purposes, had imbued me with a profound appreciation for the choices we make and the paths we walk. Freedom, I realized, was not just the ability to move unimpeded through the world, it was the right to choose one's fate, to live a life unmarred by the will of others. Reflecting on the ordeal, I also grappled with the notion of evil, a force I had once considered abstract, relegated to the pages of fiction. Facing the couple, witnessing their descent into darkness, forced me to confront the reality that evil was not only real but lived among us, often masked by the facade of normalcy. It was a chilling realization, one that altered my perception of humanity and the complexities that dwelled within the human heart. As I moved forward, the scars I carried became a part of me, a testament to the ordeal I had survived. They served as a reminder, not just of the vulnerability that comes with being human, but of the strength that can emerge in the face of adversity. The trauma of that night, though it would always be a shadow in my past, also became a beacon, guiding me towards a future where the lessons learned in darkness would illuminate the path ahead. In the aftermath, as I pondered the scars and the lessons they bore, I found a semblance of peace. The ordeal had changed me, but it had also shown me the depths of my own resilience. I emerged from the shadow of the eclipse not just a survivor, but a harbinger of my own light, ready to face the world with a newfound strength and wisdom. Weeks had passed since the night of the eclipse, each day a step away from the darkness and towards a semblance of normalcy. I had begun to rebuild my life, the routine of daily existence, a balm to the wounds inflicted by that harrowing ordeal. And yet, the shadow of that night lingered, a silent specter that haunted the edges of my consciousness. It was on an unremarkable afternoon, as I sifted through my emails, seeking the comfort of mundane tasks, that I stumbled upon a new message that seemed innocuous at first glance. The subject line read simply, "babysitting opportunity," a phrase that once would have sparked interest, now laden with a sinister weight. Hesitation gripped me, a visceral response born of the memories associated with those words. Yet, curiosity, or perhaps some unacknowledged need to confront the past, propelled me forward. I opened the email, the words on the screen blurring as a cold dread settled over me. "Dear Samantha, we are seeking a responsible and caring individual to look after our home and our child for an evening. We have heard great things about you and believe you would be the perfect fit for our needs. The job pays generously, and we trust you will find our home to your liking. Please, let us know if you are interested. Regards, the last name family." The message was polite, seemingly ordinary, and yet it was the unspoken that screamed loudest, the echo of a nightmare I had hoped to leave behind. No specifics were given, no names or addresses that might anchor the offer in reality. It was as if the email itself existed in a vacuum, a lure cast into the void with me as its intended catch. A shiver ran down my spine as I read and reread the message. The rational part of me argued that it was a coincidence, a simple babysitting offer with no connection to the horrors I had experienced. But another part, the part that had survived the eclipse, saw the darker implications, the possibility that the past was not as buried as I had hoped. The offer left me at a crossroads, each path shrouded in the mist of uncertainty. To ignore it might mean turning my back on a harmless opportunity, letting fear dictate my choices. But to respond, to step once more into the role of babysitter, was to open a door I had fought desperately to close, to invite the shadows of the past into the present. As I sat there, staring at the screen, the weight of the decision pressed heavily upon me. The story of that night, it seemed, was not yet complete, its final chapter awaiting my response. The offer stood as a chilling invitation, a gateway to an unknown that tugged at the scars of my ordeal with an insidious persistence. In the end, the email remained unanswered, a ghostly presence in my inbox that whispered of possibilities best left unexplored. But the seed of unease had been planted, a chilling reminder that some tales, once begun, are not so easily concluded. My story, it seemed, had found its open-ended finale, a narrative thread dangling in the wind, its conclusion shrouded in the shadows of what might yet come to pass.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the video. We highly recommend you watch the next video here. Oops. I'm waiting for you to click. Yes, you've clicked. Happy watching.